Kia ora tātou.
Mr Speaker, I call the Honourable Minister, Dr Jonathan
Reno
Coleman.
McCartney. Look, he's a nice bloke, but that was absolutely dreadful. I mean, how misinformed. What's going on in that caucus room over there? He had nothing good to say about the budget. He couldn't even agree with David Parker, his finance spokesman, who said getting to surplus is the right thing to do. So they can't even get one crucial message right about this budget. But what I can tell you, Mr Speaker, is when you look at the budget, it tells a very clear story. There's been 4.5 years of very difficult economic conditions which the national government have shepherded the country through. It hasn't been easy. We had to have a couple of zero budgets, but we are now building momentum with this budget, and it tells a very good story. And if you don't believe me, you've just got to look at the external validation that the New Zealand economy is getting, that objective feedback. So Standard & Poor's says this is the 9th best place in the world to hold debt. So actually a very good place to invest. The IMF, just the day before the budget, came out and said the New Zealand government is absolutely on the right track with its policies. It pretty much said, don't change those policy settings. Don't go back to the policy settings of the Labour government because they were getting New Zealand into deep, deep shtick. And well, that was the IMF. And so if you look at what was happening when Labour were holding the purse strings, they were spending like Topsy. They were spending like Topsy. And what was happening was the growth of the public service was going out of control. And when we came into government, we had a look at those books and we said, New Zealand cannot continue like this. And you know, that has been a problem. 70 billion now, but you know what it would have been under Labour if they had continued with those policies? 170 billion. And that's a fact. They were out of control. And we inherited a situation where debt was heading to 60% of GDP. So we had to do something, and we had to do it very, very quickly. And look at the environment we're in now. The lowest interest rates for 50 years. For 50 years. Inflation, just less than 1% over the last year. Wages, growing at 2% over the last year, projected to grow real incomes in nominal terms 20% over the next 4 years against a background of 9% inflation. So actually, more money in people's pockets at the same time as mortgages are cheaper. So we are in a very, very good position. But the one danger on the horizon is the far-left government Labour and the Greens would deliver. Because as John Key said, they might laugh on the Labour side, but David Shearer has wrapped himself in the Greens. There's no question about it. So these dangerous left-wing fundamentalists, these Bolsheviks like David Clendon over there, they are going to be there with the Labour Party if they get the chance to be in government. So you would have someone like Russell Norman as the Minister of Finance. He will be printing money. And Labour knows they can never get into power unless they promise things like finance to Russell Norman. You will have Materia Ture running transport or the environment. Seriously, it is going to be really, really bad. And so this election is going to be a contest between the centre-right and the far left. And for New Zealanders, that is going to be very, very scary. And you can actually see, 5 Labour members and 1 Green in the chamber, not a day of business experience between them. Isn't that frightening? That reflects the reality of what you would get with a Labour government. And they're saying rubbish. Well, it's absolutely true. David Clendon, he's getting more excited than I've ever seen him in the House. The Speaker's trying to bring the debate back to him. But this is the reality. We are facing a situation where if these people over here ever got hold of the Treasury benches, New Zealand would be in a huge power of trouble. So this is a very, very good budget. We've set out our 4 priorities very, very clearly. We are going to be in surplus by next year, $75 million surplus. It's thin, but it's there. And that is what 4.5 years of fiscal discipline brings you. This year, a deficit of $2 billion. Back in 2010, we were we had an $18.7 billion deficit. And when you look at where we're positioned compared to Australia, they've got a deficit of 20 billion Australian dollars this year. So we are in a very, very good position. And they can go on about, the state of the economy. The fact is, we have grown at the fastest rate in the OECD over the past year. The fastest rate, us and the Australians. Over the next year, we're going to be growing at 3%. No one's going to be growing faster than the OECD. So, the Eurozone, they're really down the gurgler. The UK, the US, Japan. We are very, very well positioned. Jobs, 50,000 new jobs over the past 2 years. Unemployment, gone from 6.8 to 6.2. But what we're not hearing from Labor, we're hearing a lot of whinging, we're hearing a lot of misinformed comment, but we're not getting one comment about what they would do better. One comment. In fact, we're not even getting a comment about what they would do full stop. So it's going to be very clear, Mr. Speaker, where the balance lies. You've got a government with a very sound economic record, which is getting us getting down power bills. Labor reckon they're going to get down power bills by regulating and nationalising the electricity industry. Well, good luck with that, because that is going to take us back to blackouts. That is going to not be the way forward. That is going to totally stop a new generation, and it is going to be incredibly bad for the economy. And I can tell you what's going to happen, Mr. Speaker. If these people were ever in charge, it would be an end to inward investment in New Zealand, because these people don't like the Chinese. And they were very clear about that during the whole Shanghai pension episode. They spoke out about it on the basis of political opportunism. And that is very, very dangerous for New Zealand. But I think what you'll see, Mr. Speaker, if these people ever get the chance to get close to the Treasury benches, you'll see a big change in those ratings from people like Standard & Poor's. You'll see the IMF, when they see hard-bitten unionists like Darian Fenton over there getting anywhere near the immigration portfolio and stopping the inflow of skills, stopping the inflow of capital, investment will fly from New Zealand. There's no question about it. It will leave. There's no question. So we focus very much on our priorities, getting back into surplus, economic growth. This is interesting, Mr. Speaker. This is interesting. Yeah, growing the economy, getting the skills here that we need here in New Zealand, encouraging, Mr. Speaker, new apprenticeships, new skills, getting people down to Christchurch, firm commitment to rebuilding Christchurch. It's actually incredible the impact that Christchurch has had, but we have willingly said it's very, very important that we rebuild New Zealand's second biggest city. $15 billion, the government's contribution out of a total rebuild of $40 billion, and that's gone up quite considerably from the $30 billion. And despite that, we are still going to hit surplus. But what I can say, if these people reckon they are going to get down debt and rebuild schools and build hospitals and fund fast broadband, where is the money going to come from? Because they are going to stop partial share floats. And that partial, yep, that's right, they say, they're proud of it. This is how economically illiterate these people are. So they need to explain, and I'm looking forward to the next speaker getting up to explain. Darian Fenton, when you are Associate Minister of Finance...
Order. The member has now brought the chair into the debate 4 times.
Darian Fenton, when that member, Darian Fenton, is Associate Minister of Finance, and she cancels partial share... This better be a point of order.
Order, the Honourable Member Darian Fenton.
I don't wish to be picky, but as we're observing one language, it would be also nice if the member would call me by my proper name. It's Darian, not Darian.
I thought Darian was going to get up and deny that she was going to be the Associate Minister of Finance, and in fact many members from both sides might have agreed with it. So anyway, one thing we've learned from the Labor contribution in this debate is how to pronounce Darian Fenton's name. But what I would say, if they are going to stop partial share floats, where are they going to get the money from? They're concerned about debt, but they're going to have to borrow more. Or are they going to go down to Christchurch and say, no, we're not going to rebuild Megan Woods' Christchurch Hospital, we're not going to rebuild schools, we're not going to put in fast broadband because we're not going to borrow the money, and we're not going to raise money for the Future Investment Fund. So basically what you're going to have with these people is more debt. You're going to have investment flying out the door. And when that member from Dunedin who's just come in says that nonsense about the worst economic record in 50 years, he is telling a gross mistruth. A gross mistruth. Here he goes. That's the only contribution he can make.
Order!
So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, it's a very good budget. We're going ahead well. The economy is growing. New Zealand's on the right track. New Zealand, don't put it all at risk. Kia ora.
Okay.
Just before I call the next member, I just want to refer members to Speaker's Rulings 27/7(1). The use of the word "you," and the member did it 3 or 4 times during that debate, is not to be used in debate because it brings the chair into it. I call the honourable member Claire Curran.
Mr. Speaker, talofa lafa.